that's one of the ways that we can tell when there's something that's impacting us. If you respond to trauma like a 5-year-old, it probably happened when you were 5. If you respond to trauma when you were a 10-year-old, it probably happened when you were 10, and so forth. That's why we have to figure out what it is, because now we can deal with the trauma in such a way that we can deal with it as a 28-year-old, not as a 9-year-old, as an 18-year-old, not as a 5-year-old. So he writes about how authoritarians, totalitarians will use brainwashing to get people to confess to crimes that they never committed. Interestingly, though, he points out, you can get people to actually seem like they come to believe that they did do it. You ever guys, forming sentences is difficult. You guys ever watch those police interrogation videos where they get someone to confess to something that they never did? Yeah, they're fascinating. You should watch them at some point, because you never know if you're ever going to be in that position, because the police won't bring you in and talk to you unless they think that you did something. And they're not there to help you. They're not there to clear you. They're there to try to they think that there's something that they can get out of you. So the best thing to do when you're talking to a police officer is just say, I want a lawyer. And the lawyer will stop that immediately, and then you leave. But of course, when you're under a totalitarian regime, you don't have the opportunity to ask for a lawyer. And so how it is that you go about doing that, again, not just getting a person to confess, because you would think like, oh, you can just use torture to do that. Kind of. But there's like a subliminal kind of a torture that you use. And they're really subtle things that most of us would think like no big deal. So it'd be like, for example, I'd ask you to tell me about your day yesterday. Start from the beginning. And you would tell me about your whole day. And then I would say, okay, but you left a lot of stuff out. Let's go back and do it again. Tell me about your day, start from the beginning. And I'll get you to do that like 5, 6, 7 times. And after a while, I'll sit there and just go, okay, you're not following what I'm saying. I'll give you some time to think about it. And I'll walk out. And then maybe an hour, 2 hours goes by, 3 hours. Somebody else will come in and they'll have like a different demeanor, different attitude, and they'll sit down with some papers and just go, hey, sorry to keep you waiting so long. So I'm here to get some information out of you. Could you tell me about your day yesterday? And then they'll keep asking you over and over and over again. And the idea behind it is that people will add in details. By the time somebody else comes through, like the 3rd or 4th interview that you do, they're now giving you ideas about what you're supposed to say, because you're just tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. Keep in mind that the whole time, you're in there now for hours and hours. The people who are coming in to interrogate you, they're there for an hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. So they can wear you down while they're constantly fresh. They're always replacing you with new people. And after a while, they can actually implant ideas into your head. Here's what you were doing yesterday. And we find that after a while, people will start to repeat what they were told they're supposed to say. Even though they never did it, they'll still repeat it as though they did do it. And so it's worth noting, because oftentimes we say, well, if someone confessed, they must have done it. Maybe, maybe not. But understand that the kind of work that's being done on you there is unconscious. It isn't happening at the conscious level. They're not just saying to you, tell us you did it. I mean, there will be interrogations like that, but normally it's much more subtle than that. Now, if you think about it in that sense, that therefore we're getting kind of like these subliminal messages, which we should remember, hopefully, from our talk last time about Jung, that these things happen at a subliminal level. Now start to think about what other kinds of feedback or information you get at a subliminal level. So, tell me if this sounds familiar. The information that you take in your life happens at 3 different levels. The first level is the conscious level. And that's the stuff, of course, that you are aware of. You see it, it's within your field of awareness. You're aware that you're in a classroom, that you're wearing shoes, that there's a printer at the back, there's a piñata up there. You see it. And then there's the stuff that happens at your unconscious level. We'll call that the personal, unconscious. That's the stuff that's the information you're taking in, but that you're not aware that you're taking it in. Little cues, little subtleties. I gave the example, I think, during the talk about like attractiveness. We find people attractive and unattractive at this level here. In other words, we see symmetry in faces. And afterwards we'll go back and we'll like add in some stuff to it. Oh, it must be the eyes, it must be the lips, it must be the cheeks. But this is what is happening here. We're seeing it at an unconscious level, And then when we answer why we think it is, we're trying to bring it into the conscious. But you have to be willing to go down into here and really examine it to find out and bring it up into here. And this is what Jung says is the whole purpose of therapy, is to bring the unconscious into the conscious so that we don't just always do what we've always done. Because if we do, we'll just call it fate. This is the meme. You know, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Well, you know, why are you always at your worst? That's just the way I am. But this has a lot to do with our behavior. And of course, the conscious stuff does too. But it's the unconscious that seems to direct, I don't say most of our behavior, but I'm going to say it, most of our behavior. It's those early childhood experiences. And it's interesting because we will all like intuitively acknowledge that the early childhood experiences are the things that make us the way that we are right now. Why are you such an angry person? That's just the way I am. No, there's something that's here. And by the way, you can find out. You can find out why you are the way that you are. I'm sorry, you can find out when it happened. Sorry. You can find out when that trauma that causes you to behave the way that you're behaving. So for example, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who lived in Los Angeles. She was 27, 28, something like that. She was 27, 28, and normally she was 27 or 28, and she was 27 or 28. What I mean by that is that when she got angry, she was 27 or 28, going on 9 years old. She would get so furious that she would like almost like pump her fist, and she would just like say like off the wall stuff, and like she would like yell a question at you, and you try to answer it, and then she would yell at you before you could answer it. She was basically a 9-year-old inhabiting an adult's body. And I'm sure some of you will know people like this, people who like they want to argue with you, but they're not really arguing with you to say anything or to hear anything. And it becomes impossible to talk to a person like that. And she would get angry like over really small things. And she would stay angry over small things. But those small things would become really huge things. And I remember one of the last times I ever talked to her, because I try to surround myself with interesting people, and she was an interesting person. I would not be surprised if she's in prison today because of stuff like this. I remember one time where she was angry at somebody, this other girl, long story, and she was like just going off about it. And I was trying to like calm her down and talk to her, and then because I was trying to talk to her, she then turns on me, and all of a sudden I'm just as much of a problem as the other person. That's a very little kid thing to do. You're not on my side 100%, then shut up, I hate you too. And then finally when she would kind of redirect and she'd come back, the next day she calmed down and she was talking to me, and she was asking me to help her figure out a way to ruin that other person's life. And what they were angry about was an insult. It wasn't even anything like major. And I kind of laughed, she genuinely wanted to find a way to like, you know, plant drugs in their car or something like that. So they go to prison, lose their job, all of these things. And I just thought, my God, seriously? Over something like that? And then of course she gets furious at me again. And then I just kind of realized, well, this person's not going to get any better. So I've tried talking to them. I even tried directing her into therapy. But having said all that, the trauma in her background that has her behaving like that, what age do you suppose that trauma happened to her? Based on what I just said.
At 9.
At 9, yeah. Because she becomes a 9-year-old again. And that's one of the ways that we can tell when there's something that's impacting us. We can see kind of, you know, if you respond to trauma like a 5-year-old, it probably happened when you were 5. If you respond to trauma when you were a 10-year-old, it probably happened when you were 10, and so forth. That's why we have to figure out what it is, because now we can deal with the trauma in such a way that we can deal with it as a 28-year-old, not as a 9-year-old, as an 18-year-old, not as a 5-year-old. And until that happens, this is the thing that's going to always overcome you, because children are inherently unreasonable, can't be talked to, can't be reasoned with, can only be held emotionally. And so we have to bring those things up into the conscious. Otherwise, we're going to do what we've always done, and we're going to call it fate. We don't want to be that person. Hopefully, we don't want to be that person. And so, now start thinking about the other things in your life, because we seem to recognize that pretty easily. Early childhood experiences contribute to my behavior today. Okay. Even if you can't remember them, even if I can't remember them. Even if they entered you unconsciously, yes. Okay, now, start thinking about it at your age now, what, or in the past few years, what has been entering your mind unconsciously? And I would imagine, I don't know, hopefully you can introspect, but I imagine a lot of people are going to say, nothing, I'm aware, always. Are you though? All the movies you watch, all the music you listen to, all the TV shows you watch, all the conversations you have, all the podcasts you listen to, none of it happens to seep into your unconscious? Probably. And now you start to wonder how much. You know, we live in a world where, I mean, think about it. How often do you come across a place in your life that is totally quiet? Totally quiet. Except in here when I ask a question. It's pretty rare, huh? What do we typically fill up our heads with?
Smoke.
Noise. Fill in the blank, whatever it is. I recently found out about white noise machines. Sometimes it blows me away, like how, it's going to sound like an arrogant thing to say, but please understand where I'm coming from when I say this. It blows me away sometimes when I think about how much I know about certain things. Like, I know incredible amounts of information about certain things, and then I find out that there are these white noise machines. I'll mention them, and people are like, oh, you didn't know about those? No. Can you believe it? They're machines that just make noise. Yeah, they've been around for like 20 years. No shit. Okay. I wouldn't know otherwise. I mentioned it to my last period about these white noise machines. Any of you guys have these?
I think there's green noise machines too, I think. I don't know.
Don't get me started. Someone recommended an app to me, and it was specifically because it plays like noise and music and stuff, and they just said, hey, this made me think of you, and it was green noise. And I was like, oh, I gotta hear this. I click on it, and I can hear it for only $3.99 a month.
I know, that's why.
But I gotta know what green noise sounds like, because I told you, I've heard green before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Took acid and I heard green. So I want to see if it's the same thing. I want to see if it's that. So I can sit there and go, that's not green. Or I can go, yeah. But even when we go to sleep now, I wonder how many of you guys fall asleep to something. You put on a podcast, you put on music, and you fall asleep to that. Yeah. Even those quiet times. Now we fill up our ears with noise. And noise doesn't just mean like, noise, but music, podcasts, or whatever. I was thinking about it recently because a friend of mine was telling me that their boyfriend can't go to sleep without listening to the television. The television has to be on. So he has to set the television on a timer to turn off because he can't fall asleep without the television on. He says it reminds him of being a kid, and that it just kind of comforts him. And yeah, but that tells you something about the mind. Like you're stimulating your mind at a time when it's supposed to be going calm and quiet. So I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a thing. And it's worth considering what kind of things we take in. And so once again, I ask that question. I wonder what kinds of things we take in. Because as we know, you have to be a sea of virtue to take even a little polluted stream in without becoming polluted yourself. And so if these things are entering us unconsciously, maybe it's worth finding out. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not. Some of you guys know that women ain't shit, right? Some of you guys know men ain't shit too, huh? Sometimes you know where you got it from. Sometimes it's just a zeitgeist that goes throughout the age because you're taking it in the music that you're listening to. And then, surprise, surprise, it's like, where are all the good men? Where are all the good women? I don't know. Maybe they ended up with the people who weren't listening to the stuff that said that they weren't shit. That was his example last. I'll leave last period's example to last period. But it'd be interesting to think about that. If you listen to the music that you listen to, do you genuinely think it doesn't impact your thought process? If not, let me know. Like I think I mentioned before, I can turn you on to some really good Christian music, some really good Islamic music, and some really good Buddhist music. And I know that many of you are thinking like, oh, that'd be weird. So the message does matter. So the message does matter. At least you acknowledge it when I put it that way. And if that's the case, maybe we should acknowledge that the message does matter. And if we're saying it doesn't, but then we recognize that it does, that means it probably is playing on you at the unconscious level. Now I wonder what else is playing on us at the unconscious level. And again, please don't take this to be an arrogant thing or it's just a narration, man. None of us is invulnerable to that. We're all vulnerable to those unconscious influences. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Wednesday? Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah.